This is the story of a pirate's chest that shaked the sea. It's so dangerous that it awakened even the darkest force of the sea. It costs countless life. Every pirate's dream to have, but only the luckiest get. Who is this pirate, and what's hidden in that chest? Watch till the end, because it is going to be a journey you will remember. Let's begin. My story begins in the quiet days when my father owned a small inn called the Admiral Benbow, a lonely spot by the sea. Life there was simple, until the day a strange man arrived. I'll never forget how he looked as he trudged up to our door, pulling a heavy sea chest behind him on a barrow. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with skin browned by the sun. His blue coat was old and dirty, and his long hair was tied back in a greasy pigtail. Most striking of all was the white scar that slashed across one cheek, giving him a fierce appearance. He paused at the doorway, looking around the cove, and began to sing in a raspy, cracked voice. 15 men on the dead man's chest, yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. The song gave me chills. It was as if the sea itself had sent him to us. He knocked on the door with a stick, and when my father answered, he barked out a demand for rum. "This'll do," he said, looking around. "A quiet place, close to the sea. You can call me Captain. I'll be staying here for a while." Without waiting for a reply, he tossed a handful of gold coins onto the floor. "That should cover my stay. Bacon, eggs, and rum. Plenty of rum is all I need." And just like that, he made himself at home. The captain was a strange man. During the day, he wandered the cliffs with a brass telescope, always watching the horizon. At night, he sat by the fire, drinking glass after glass of rum and water and humming that eerie sea song. He rarely spoke, and when he did, his tone was rough and commanding. But there was something odd about him. Every day he asked if we'd seen any seafaring men passing by. At first, I thought he was lonely and looking for company, but soon I realized it was fear. He was watching for someone, and he didn't want them to find him. One day, he pulled me aside. "Listen, boy," he said in a low, gruff voice. "Keep your eyes open. If you see a sailor with one leg, you come tell me right away. There'll be a silver coin in it for you." I promised to do as he asked, but the thought of this one-legged sailor haunted me. At night, I dreamed of him, a terrible figure, hopping through the dark with a cruel grin on his face. Though I feared the mysterious one-legged man, I wasn't as scared of the captain as most people were. When he drank too much, which was often, he became loud and unpredictable. He'd force everyone in the inn to sing along to his sea shanties or listen to his terrifying stories of pirates, shipwrecks, and murder. The neighbors avoided him as much as they could, but they couldn't help being curious. Some of the younger men even admired him, calling him a real sea dog and saying he was the kind of man who made England strong. But his presence wasn't good for the inn. My father grew more and more anxious, and the stress began to take a toll on his health. The captain had paid well at first, but his money ran out, and he refused to leave. Whenever my father tried to bring it up, the captain would glare at him, snort angrily, and storm off. One evening, Dr. Livesey, our local doctor and magistrate, came to visit my father, who had grown very ill. After dinner, the doctor sat in the parlor, smoking his pipe and chatting with some neighbors. The captain, already drunk, started singing his usual song. 15 men on the dead man's chest, yo-ho-ho and a bottle of rum. But this time, the doctor didn't stop talking. This made the captain furious. He slammed his hand on the table and shouted, "Silence there between decks." Dr. Livesey turned to him calmly. "Sir, if you keep drinking like this, the world will soon be rid of a very dirty scoundrel," he said. The captain roared with rage. He pulled out a knife and threatened the doctor, but Dr. Livesey didn't even flinch. "Put that knife away, or I'll see you hang," he said firmly. For a moment, the two men locked eyes. Then, grumbling like a beaten dog, the captain lowered his knife and sat down. From that night on, he was quieter for a while. One cold winter morning, as I was setting the breakfast table, the door creaked open and a man stepped inside. He was pale, with a greasy look, and 2 fingers missing from his left hand. He didn't seem like much of a fighter, but there was something sly and dangerous about him. "Is this table for my mate Bill?" he asked, grinning. I told him I didn't know any Bill, only the captain. "Well," he said, "Bill might be called Captain. Has he got a scar on his cheek?" When I nodded, the man's grin widened. "That's my mate Bill, all right. Where is he?" I told him the captain was out, walking along the cliffs. The man settled himself by the door, waiting for the captain to return. When the captain finally came back, the man sprang to his feet. "Bill!" he shouted. The captain froze, his face turned pale, and he looked like he'd seen a ghost. "Black Dog," he said in a low, shaky voice. The two men stared at each other for a long moment. Then Black Dog smiled. "It's been a while, Bill. We've got things to talk about." The two men sat down at the table, speaking in low voices. I couldn't hear much of what they said, but it was clear they were arguing. Suddenly, their voices rose, and Black Dog stood up, slamming his fist on the table. Before I knew it, both men had drawn knives. They lunged at each other, their blades flashing in the dim light. Black Dog was quicker. He dodged the captain's blow and slashed him across the shoulder. Blood spattered the floor as the captain let out a roar of pain. Black Dog didn't wait for another round. He bolted out the door and disappeared down the road. The captain slumped against the wall, clutching his wound. "Get Dr. Livesey," he gasped. Dr. Livesey came quickly and treated the captain's wound. "You need to stop drinking, or you'll be dead soon," the doctor warned him. But the captain didn't listen. As soon as the doctor left, he began muttering to himself about Black Dog and the others who would come for him. "They'll want my chest," he said. For the first time, I realized that the sea chest he guarded so fiercely wasn't just full of clothes, it held something valuable, something dangerous. The captain's paranoia grew worse by the day. Every sound made him jump, and he spent hours pacing the inn with his cutlass in hand. My mother and I were too busy caring for my father, who was growing weaker, to pay much attention to him. The sun was barely up when trouble walked through the door of the Admiral Benbow Inn. Black Dog, a sailor with a nasty scar across his cheek, strode in like he owned the place. He spotted the old sea captain, Billy Bones, hunched over his breakfast, and his lips curled into a knowing smile. Billy didn't look pleased. His eyes narrowed at the sight of his old shipmate, and tension filled the room. Black Dog approached, slapped the table, and said, "I'll have a glass of rum, boy," pointing at me, Jim Hawkins. "From this fine lad here, as I've taken a liking to. Then we'll sit and talk like old shipmates." I fetched the rum, though my hands trembled a little. When I returned, they were seated at the captain's table. Black Dog sat near the door, angled to keep one eye on Billy and the other on his escape route. As I set the drink down, he barked, "Leave the door open, boy." No eavesdropping for me. I did as he asked, retreating to the bar, but keeping close enough to listen. At first, I heard only low murmurs and grumbles, but their voices soon grew louder. Billy, ever the stubborn one, roared, "No! No, I said no, and I mean it. If it's hanging you're afraid of, let us all hang together." Suddenly, the crash of a chair, the scrape of steel, and a furious shout sent me scrambling to the door. Black Dog, bleeding from his shoulder, burst into the room and bolted for the exit, with Billy hot on his heels, cutlass in hand. At the doorway, Billy swung a vicious strike, but Black Dog ducked, and the blade sank into the inn's signboard instead. The sound of the blade biting wood echoed, and for a moment, Billy stood there, staring at the Admiral Benbow sign like he'd forgotten what he was doing. Black Dog didn't wait. He vanished over the hill, his blood trailing in the snow. Billy swayed, gripping the doorframe. His face was pale, and he gasped, "Jim, rum." He leaned heavily against the wall, his voice weak but insistent. "Rum. I need rum." I rushed to fetch the drink, but my hands shook. The scene was chaotic, and I fumbled, breaking a glass. Before I could return, a heavy thud came from the parlor. Running in, I found Billy, sprawled on the floor, unconscious. His face had turned a sickly grey, his breath labored. My mother, alarmed by the noise, hurried downstairs. "Oh, what a disgrace!" she cried, her face pale with worry. "Your poor father's sick, and now this." We thought he'd been wounded in the scuffle, but no injury explained his collapse. Desperate, I tried to pour rum down his throat, but his teeth were clenched tight. Just then, Dr. Livesey arrived, here to check on my ailing father. "What's this now?" the doctor demanded, striding into the room. "Where's he hurt?" "He's not wounded, Doctor," my mother fretted. "He just collapsed." Dr. Livesey knelt beside the captain, his sharp eyes scanning the man. "No wounds here," he said, briskly. "It's a stroke, as I warned him it would be. Mrs. Hawkins, go tend to your husband. Jim, fetch me a basin." When I returned, the doctor had already rolled up the captain's sleeve, revealing his tattooed arm. Words like, "Here's luck," and "Billy Bones is fancy," decorated the skin, along with a grim sketch of a gallows. "Prophetic," the doctor muttered, running a finger over the design. "Now, Jim, are you afraid of blood?" "No, sir," I replied, though my voice wavered. "Good. Hold the basin steady." He used a small blade to open a vein, letting dark blood trickle into the basin. Slowly, Billy's eyes fluttered open. His gaze landed first on the doctor, then on me. "Black Dog," he croaked. "Where is he?" "Gone," said the doctor firmly. "And you'll join him in the grave if you keep drinking that poison you call rum. I've saved your miserable life once. Do you want to lose it?" Billy grumbled, but his strength was gone. Between us, we dragged him upstairs and laid him on the bed. "Now, Mr. Bones," said the doctor, "hear me clearly. One more drop of rum will kill you. Understand?" Billy didn't answer, only groaned as his head fell back against the pillow. Dr. Livesey left me in charge as he went to see my father, but not before warning me again. "Keep him quiet, Jim. If he has another stroke, it'll be his last." Around noon, I brought the captain some water and medicine. He looked worse, his skin pale, his hands trembling. "Jim," he rasped, "you're the only one who's stood by me. I've always been good to you, haven't I? Always slipped you a coin, treated you fair." I nodded cautiously, unsure where this was going. "Then get me some rum, boy." "Just one noggin? The doctor doesn't know what he's talking about. I've survived plagues and storms with rum. Don't let me die dry, Jim. I'll pay you. A golden guinea." His voice was pleading, but I shook my head. "I don't want your money." And the doctor said, "Curse the doctor," he hissed, his eyes wild. "I'm seeing ghosts, Jim. Old Flint, standing there in the corner, grinning at me. I'll go mad without it." Reluctantly, I fetched him one glass. No more. He drained it in a single gulp, his breathing easing for the moment. "Better?" he muttered. "Now, Jim, listen. If they come for me, if they give me the black spot, you run to the doctor, you hear? Tell him it's Flint's crew. They want my chest, but they won't get it. Not if I can help it." "The black spot?" I asked, confused. "A pirate's summons," he explained darkly. "If they give it to me, they mean to take my life." His words sent a chill through me, but before I could press for details, he fell into a restless sleep. The next day, my father passed away. The grief and the demands of running the inn consumed my time, leaving me little thought for the captain. He was weaker than before, but his temper was sharper, and he took to helping himself to rum, despite the doctor's warnings. Then, on a cold, foggy afternoon, I saw a figure approaching the inn. He moved slowly, tapping the ground with a stick. His hunched frame and the green shade covering his eyes made him appear old and frail. But as he drew closer, a sense of dread filled me. "Kind boy," he called in a thin, wheedling voice. "Can you help a poor blind man?" I offered my hand, but the moment he gripped it, his strength was terrifying. His fingers were like iron, and he yanked me close, growling, "Take me to the captain." "Sir, I can't," I stammered. "He's not well." "Take me now, boy, or I'll snap your arm," he hissed. His voice was cold and cruel, sending shivers down my spine. Too scared to resist, I led him into the parlor. The captain sat slumped at the table, staring into his rum glass. When he saw the blind man, all the color drained from his face. "Bill," said the blind man, his tone mocking. "Hold out your hand." Billy obeyed, like a man in a trance. The blind man pressed something into his palm, a small, circular piece of paper. "Business is done," the blind man sneered, retreating swiftly into the fog. The captain stared at the paper, his face twisted with terror. 10 o'clock, he gasped. 6 hours. Suddenly, he staggered to his feet, clutching his throat. His body swayed, then collapsed to the floor with a heavy thud. I ran to him, calling for my mother, but it was too late. Billy Bones was dead, struck down by his fear as much as his failing health. Tears filled my eyes, surprising even me. Despite his faults, I had grown used to the old sea dog. Now he was gone. As I stood there, the weight of his last words hit me. Flint's crew, the black spot, and that mysterious sea chest upstairs. Trouble wasn't done with the Admiral Benbow, not by a long shot, and so the captain's secrets unraveled, his past catching up to him in a deadly game of greed and betrayal. But his death was only the first chapter. The chest he guarded so fiercely still sits upstairs, its contents a mystery. What lies inside? Gold, maps, or something far more dangerous? And now, with Flint's crew closing in, the real danger begins. Will the next knock at the door bring salvation or doom? Subscribe and stay tuned, because the story is far from over. Explore the playlist to watch the full story. If you enjoyed this video, then hit that like button below and share your thoughts on the comments section. What happens next will change everything. Don't miss the next part of this gripping adventure. Bye-bye.